the idea of faith and doubt. And I just want to carry that same idea in another direction. This week we're going to be talking about faith and fear. The two are closely related, but they're a little different. I read an article some years ago in a magazine, Psychology Today, or one of those types of things. So they asked 1,000 people what they feared most. And their responses in order of frequency were death of a loved one, serious personal illness, financial worries, nuclear war, being a crime victim, spiders, loss of a job, natural disaster, the dark, loneliness, and being unloved. And there was more after that. I was surprised at some of those, the things we normally think of, heights or fire, or I'd always been told that the number one fear that most people have is public speaking. But that wasn't the way here in this one. And it could be some of your fears are on this list, and so all of them are valid. All those are things that we can be anxious about. And as followers of Jesus, as believers, we understand that we're not immune from these fears. Some are very much born into us. I mean, a lot of our fears are what we're taught to be fearful of by the people around us or by our parents. If your folks were fearful of snakes and taught you that, chances are you're going to be fearful of snakes. That was never a big problem in our house. I did bring a little ringneck snake in to see Mom one day, and that didn't work out too well when I was young. But I've told the story many times of, as you know, my brother Mike was a tremendous joker all of his life. And we were young, and we had a woodshed behind the house, and where he kept wood stacked and different things. And there was always a black snake back there, and we left it alone because of Daddy wouldn't let us kill it because of being a mouser. So Gary, one day we were back there working, and I was 8, maybe years old, so he would have been like 14. And he was really afraid of it. I was looking at the rafters, looking, everywhere. So we were working, and me and Mike took a little branch off a weeping willow tree, didn't say a word, just running up his pants leg, just enough to brush it real good. And he never touched the ground until he got to the creek over there just about. Then it made him mad because we were all laughing. But Mike was bigger than him, so he couldn't do nothing about it. But he learned the fear, is what I'm saying. It was, what we do is, the fears that we have are what generates within us. If we have been burned, we tend to fear fire. If we, have been in a situation that's caused harm, that's what we are fearful of. And sometimes as God's plan is revealed to us, as the magnitude of our life and what we are called to be is revealed to us, that in of itself causes fear. And Scripture is not blind when it talks about and teaches us about fear that were in the lives of the people that we learn about in Scripture, people through the years. They were not immune from this fear. The difference, however, is how we deal with our fear. In this time, this day and age we live in right now, there's a lot of folks that are fearful, a lot of children that I've come in contact with that are fearful because of, as our granddaughter says, the corona in her accent. And fearful of all these things. People are fearful of what's going on in our cities and in our country, and there's anxiety, and there's a lot of things from the very personal to the very grand. And these things can cripple us. They can prevent us from doing what we need to within the kingdom of God. Or we can face those things with the assurance that our lives are watched over by Jesus himself, that we are not apart from someone to help us. You know, Psalm 23, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, it doesn't say that we're not walking through it. We are, but I will fear no evil, because thy rod and thy staff comfort me. There's a correlation between our fear and how we deal with our fear. And the manner we deal with it, oftentimes, I think, is directly related to our relationship with Jesus Christ and what our faith is. And it's easier to face a fearful situation when our communion with God dominates our life, when we have a sense of purpose and perfection in that relationship. If I go out I'm not a real big fan of water. I don't swim well, and I think my feet work better than my fins, you know, so I don't. But if I'm on a boat, I'm much more comfortable if I feel that whoever's operating the boat knows what they're doing. You know, there's a certain amount of confidence in that. Once when I lived in Miami, I had a friend that had a catamaran. We were on Biscayne Bay one day. Biscayne Bay, in case you don't know, is a huge body of water outside of Miami. And a catamaran, you know, it's got two hulls and a sail. And he said, you stand up on the, because I'm big, you get up on the high side and be the counterbalance. What he didn't tell me was that the faster you go, the more that side comes out of the water, the faster you go. And the wind, we caught a fresh wind coming back across there, and we're sitting on about a 45-degree angle, and I'm on the high side going, if I ever get off here. My confidence in the operator was low at that point. You see, it's easy to face our fear if we feel comfortable in the one who is in control of the situation, or who has some semblance of direction about things. In Psalm 27, we'll be looking at the passage this morning. Psalm 27. I'm going to start with the first 6 verses here. Psalm 27, starting in verse 1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom should I be afraid? When evildoers come against me to devour my flesh, my foes and my enemies stumbled and fell. Though an army deploy against me, my heart is not afraid. Though war break out against me, still I am confident. I have asked one thing from the Lord. It is what I desire, to dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, gazing on the beauty of the Lord and seeking him in his temple. For he will conceal me in his shelter in the day of adversity. He will hide me under the cover of his tent. He will set me high on a rock. Then my head will be high above my enemies around me. I will offer sacrifices in his tent with shouts of joy. I will sing and make music to the Lord. The more we have confidence in what the Lord has promised to us, the easier it is to face the fear. The psalmist here is saying, not that he was immune from it, but he's saying, the Lord is my light and my salvation. I am going to stand on that. And whom shall I fear? Who is going to come that's going to be greater than that? So that personal faith that we have, that relationship, that understanding helps us to overcome fear. Fear enlarges us. And the times in my life that I've been afraid, it's when that situation has overwhelmed my logic, overwhelmed my individual awareness. Even when we're younger, fear often comes to us not out of something that's real, but out of something that's imagined. I was thinking this week of all the times when I was thinking about fear, about things I've been fearful of. When we were in 8th grade, a bunch of us that were going to play freshman football, we all went up to the high school, got a bus, and we went to Johnson City to East Tennessee State to watch a football game. Coming back, and this was 1968, so they wouldn't do this now, but as the bus came through, this was 11 o'clock at night, they would just drop kids off, at the end of the roads, just wherever. I mean, there was no, we're all going to meet, and y'all got, we're going to set you out and you get home the best way you can. So, but they let me off down there where Quincy's is, and I had to walk to the house. Well, I've done that many, many times. No problem. And I don't know what was in the laurel bushes up there above the road about 11:30 that night as I walked through my Nunzio's house, but whatever it was shouldn't have been there. And I was fearful. I had done this many times in the daylight. This was dark night. There was something there. So I set a land speed record for me from there to the house. Fear overcame my logic. Fear, for the most part, is an illogical response. Now, if you can be fearful and careful, I know that if I'm cutting with a chainsaw, I have to respect that and be fearful of what it can do to me because I have been cut and know. It doesn't know the difference between this limb and a tree limb. That's a fear that's based on reality and awareness. But many of our fears are not rational. They enlarge within our mind. So this psalmist begins with an affirmation that the Lord God, that Jehovah is light, salvation, and defense. He says, though I fear, this is what I'm going to use as a starting point. I believe these things, and I have established these things. So whenever we allow the Lord to have the first priority, whenever we allow Him to bring to us a sense of awareness of His comfort and His protection and His hedge in our life, we start with a leg up on the fear because we've established we've determined this. Before fear can overwhelm us, like the psalmist, we need to affirm that the Lord is the light that dispels the darkness. He is the one that takes us and keeps us from danger. We have to have that foundational belief. And if we recognize that He is the defender of our life, that He is the one who cares for us, that He is going to be with us in the midst of all things, our dependence upon the things of the world and our sensory perceptions, which can be not always real. If you walk through the darkness at night, a lot of things that aren't there become there. You see things, you hear things. It becomes real to you. So if we no longer trust in our own selves, in our own senses, but have this sort of foundational belief in who the Lord is, our level of fear diminishes. But what the psalmist is trying to tell us, that faith overcomes fear when the faith is personal. Faith transcends our reaction whenever our faith is intimate to us. Our faith as the body, as the church, when we talk about the corporate nature of our relationship with the Lord, is wonderful. But that is really not going to have an impact upon my life when I am isolated, when I'm by myself. Whenever I am in a situation where it's me and whatever, that's when my faith is critical, when my understanding of the Lord in my life. Look in the first couple of verses of this psalm, the personal pronouns that's used. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. In whom shall I be afraid? He goes on, it's all about me, intimate, personal. Why should I be afraid? I mean, it's one thing for y'all not to be afraid. It's a whole other thing for me not to be afraid. You know, me as my own individual self. And this faith is personal, not the product of what someone else has told him, not the product of what he had been led to believe, but what he truly believed, not through remembering what had been told to him, but through an awareness of the individual nature, his deep personal conviction that the Lord was going to provide for him, was going to be with him. And our faith increases as we experience the victories that the Lord gives us, as we see, as he proves, as the song we sing, morning by morning, new mercies I see. As it's compounded in our lives, we build, as we mature, as the Lord works, we build, I hate to use the word equity because it's finite, but we build kind of an excess or an equity or a storehouse or an overflow of understanding that the Lord is going to provide. And we draw on that whenever we feel that he's not. We have a confidence based on the fact that he has brought me to this point. So when I face these things and I am fear, and fear tends to overwhelm me, and fear almost always causes us to act irrationally. Fear causes us to run blindly into the darkness. Fear causes us to do some strange things. Causes us to do atypical things, things that we would not normally do in our normal lives. That's why, and I don't know about y'all, but the group that I grew up with were not always kind when it come to fear, because a lot of times their goal in life was to scare you and then laugh at your expense at your responses, to create a situation. So you kind of learn that, because that you react not as you normally would. You don't sound, you scream and you make noises and you do things when you're afraid, when you're scared. And the Lord, what he's trying to say is our faith establishes this foundational position where we believe that nothing is going to transcend that, nothing is going to take that away from us. So we can approach fearful situations. We can approach the things that are happening in our world today. Someone I heard this week say that they wish that that we could have a reset on 2020, 2.0, because of the things that's happened. But those things, though they're real and they're intimidating, as believers, we don't stand in irrational fear of them. Our lives are not overwhelmed by them. Because as Job said, though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. We've been given an opportunity to have a faith that transcends the things of the world. That faith comes from a desire to know God, a desire to want to do these things. You must ask yourself at some point, how well do we want to know this Lord that we're talking about? How dedicated are we to learning about this Lord that we profess to believe in so easily? How single-minded are we about the kingdom? How purposeful are we about our maturing? How great is our desire to commune with God? The psalmist faced life with confidence, he said, because of his desire to commune with God. Verse 4, he says, I've asked one thing from the Lord. It is what I desire, to dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, gazing on the beauty of the Lord and seeking him in his temple. He says, this is what I desire. This is what drives me. Psalm 42, as the deer pants for the water brooks, so my soul longs after you. You see, our faith comes, it matures and grows as we have a desire to know this Lord more intimately. He said, I want to be in God's house, not just in the building, but in the presence. I want to be in the presence of the Holy One, to dwell there, to be allowed to dwell in the house of the Lord all my life. There's an intensity, there's a deliberateness, there's a purpose about what he does there. And his desire to practice the meditations of the Lord, to contemplate what the Lord, who the Lord is and how he's moving in his life, to behold the beauty of God, to gaze upon the face of the one who sustains him. I think our failing sometimes is in our complacency, or that we feel that we have enough. I want to approach the Lord, and this is not my thought. This is something I heard several years ago, and after having the big dog that I had to understand, I want to approach the Lord with the intensity of a Rottweiler when you set his food bowl down. You ever said, a really hungry big dog? It's whoa. He is all about that. I am right here. Sometimes you can't even get it set down enough, have to hold him back, till you set it down. They make these bowls that have the ridges in them, supposed to slow the dog down. I don't know how long that dog's tongue is, and he can clean that out in no time. But there's an intensity about that. What I love about it is the single-mindedness there. It's food. I'm hungry. I'm going to eat. And I'm going to eat as fast as I can, because maybe there'll be something else. And if you've got two dogs, invariably, one's going to eat faster than the other because he's hoping that this guy's going to leave something. There's a purpose about it. So if we have that intensity, if we have that deliberateness or that desire to drink from the fountain, to eat with that intensity, Lord, just let me have it all. But instead, many of us eat at the things of God like a cat does. You put out the food, and he goes and gets a piece, and he goes over here. And he may come back, and he may not. Because he knows you're going to be there. He knows that he is the king of this domain, and you're there to serve him. And if he doesn't eat it now, it's going to be there later. Very, just a little bit. I'll get some later. The dog's going, what are you doing? Do you not see that that's there? Oh, I'll take care of it for you while you're in. No. See the difference? We oftentimes in our Christian life, we sort of nibble around the edges, and we find ourselves, whenever our faith is threatened or is challenged, or we face adversity, or we are fearful, we find that we're a little lacking in this relationship and in our confidence in what the Lord's doing, because we've never taken the opportunity to strengthen it. We've always been very dainty about it. I don't particularly like eating in really fancy settings, because you don't know how much you're supposed to eat. A lot of times you don't know how you're supposed to eat it. You're supposed to use all the knives and forks, Just very polite. Yes, thank you, And a lot of times the food is little miniature portions. Oh, a fork and country style steak and gravy. You know, something I can eat. Get in the midst of it. And that's the way I think of this idea of, as we go before the Lord, He calls us to come to the table and eat. All you who are weary and heavy laden, come to me, and I will give you rest. It's like we come with a tiny little portion. Whenever He's offering all this, and then whenever we are tested, we wonder why we don't have enough. Why are we still hungry? Why do we not have the resources when we've never taken the opportunity to store up? We've never taken the opportunity to be a part, to delve into it, to grow into it, to consume it. So our faith grows with a desire to know Him, with an understanding of what He's promised us. And a deep, abiding, personal faith elevates us above the difficulties of this life. It does not release us from it. Please don't get me wrong. We still have to deal with it. It's still present because we're still present in this carnal world. But we're given a place of refuge within the storm. We have the means to be lifted above the fury. We still know it's there. We still have to experience it. We still feel the wind. But the fear of that is removed as we have confidence in the Lord to sustain us. This is why the psalmist is able to proclaim that he will indeed sing praises unto the Lord, even though he is fearful. He sings not because someone else told him to, but because he's discovered the reality of the presence of holy God for himself. You know, one of the most useless things we can do whenever we are around someone who is really afraid, to come up and tell them, don't be afraid. That, you know, and they look at you like, do you not understand the situation? Why? Oh, don't be afraid, because I'm telling you not to be afraid. No. If we can say, don't be afraid because this is what's real, this is the, you know, give some foundation to it. When the Lord tells us, do not be afraid, He's not saying, don't be afraid simply because I told you, but don't be afraid because I will stand with you. I will sustain you. I will be beside you. So these are the words of a man who has experienced the reality of God's deliverance, faced the difficulties of life with a total unwavering faith in his Lord. So when these fearful things come along, he says, I have this to draw from. So faith is the antithesis of fear. It's the opposite of fear. Faith allows us to face fear, not diminishing it, not saying it doesn't exist, but because I know that I know, I'm able to face that. For I am convinced that He is able to keep that I've entrusted to Him against that day. I believe that He is able to do that in my life. So is our faith sufficient to cast out the fear, or are you empowered and captured by this evil, fearful spirit? We have a choice of either faith or fear. And sometimes it's a choice. My mother, I loved her to death, but the latter part of her life, she was very fearful of a lot of things. She was fearful of, we used to say that she was afraid to live and she was afraid to die. She was afraid of living and afraid of dying. And it's a terrible place to be. And the Lord did not give us this courage blindly. He gives it to us based on His desire for us to use it within His kingdom. If we are fearful and unsure, attempting to live and deal with the things that occur in our life on our strength, we will often find it wanting. But Jesus offers us the opportunity to approach these self-same things with a renewed sense of confidence. Not because we're different, but because He is with us. And His plan for us is real. We make a decision right now that will change